Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to FOBtv, the future of business. It is here, this location, where we explore the forces shaping tomorrow. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict. I'm a futurist and lecturer here at TCS. And today we're going to explore healthcare and the future of healthcare and the impact of AI on healthcare. And to help us do that, I want to welcome Suhas Uliyar, the former Senior Vice President of Product Management and Clinical and Healthcare AI at Oracle. Thanks for joining us, Suhas.
Hey, Kevin, great to see you. Thank you for having me.
You know, you and I connect on just about every giant technology wave. I think the first time our paths crossed, if I got it right, was like 2002.
Yeah.
And you were at Dexterra, and enterprise mobility was the theme we were all talking about.
Correct.
Yes. And then
it's been 24 years and you haven't changed a bit.
Oh, thank you. So kind. I don't believe a word of it. And then I think we might have reconnected around Internet of Things.
Correct. SAP.
And sensors and, you know, the whole Internet of everything. And we just keep reconnecting all the time here. I think you've been on the show annually for the last 20 years. Right. I love it.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to be at interesting junctions of technology disruptions and changes and been able to convert them into meaningful businesses. So, of course, mobile was one, then IoT got into, I think the last time we spoke was also about chatbots and conversational AI, digital assistants, and now, the world of agentic technologies.
Absolutely. And so you, over the years, probably over the last bunch of years, became very passionate about healthcare and trying to change that and revolutionize it and to use all these technologies to make the experience a better experience. And that's really what I think we can talk about today. Just, pull back the curtains and what are you learning out there? But before we do that, where are you calling in from today?
Oh, I am at home now, back in Seattle. Cut down my travel quite a bit now.
All right.
Taking a hiatus in my career and looking at doing some consulting and advising some companies, coming with some new product ideas of my own. But I am home in Seattle for a change.
All right. I love it. So let's just jump right in there and talk about that. What are some of the most exciting developments that you've seen in healthcare and AI, let's just say over the last year?
Sure. I think what excites me the most is that healthcare is finally starting to move from traditional sort of systems of record to systems of work. You and I chatted about this a while ago where, for the long time, most applications were really about documenting what has happened and for the humans to do all the work. Now what we're seeing is that AI is starting to help with the work itself, i.e. pre-drafting work, like preparing it, coordinating it, and in some cases even initiating like the next steps. So specifically to healthcare, like, documenting the patient-doctor conversation, the patient communication, even doing automated scheduling, coding, billing, and follow-ups, right? So that's really exciting to see sort of how we moved from this dumb system of record where you manually do all the work to this pre-drafting work and having completely changing sort of the interaction pattern with the users to be one more of a refinement loop. So that's one. The other thing I find interesting is that the conversation has matured. For a long time, it was all about models. Remember, we talked about BERT and Muse and then the generative models and all these versions from Claude and OpenAI and Google. But now it's about workflow. It's about workflow, governance, trust, identity, and how you actually deploy this in real health systems. To me, that's certainly been a sign that we're moving away from the experimentation stages into truly real change.
So let me ask you a question before we dig deeper. Is the current healthcare system broken?
Oh, certainly. Absolutely. No doubt about it. So, and it's broken not because the EHRs are broken or certain applications are broken. I think healthcare systems are broken generally because there's a lack of cohesive interoperability between them. That's the bottom line.
Okay. So let's talk about that in a way, because the big technology companies don't seem to just be selling software to hospitals left and right now. They're actually helping to redesign how health systems sense, decide, communicate, document, automate, and personalize care. Is that what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, totally, Kevin. Yeah, I agree. The new model is much more than helping redesign how work gets done. This is why I keep coming back to the system of record, the system of work concept, right? And you can see it in the market. Like OpenAI, for example, is pushing away from just models to more secure health-grade AI, right? They've got their direct-to-consumer as well as to the providers. Anthropic is moving into healthcare and life sciences workflows. I recently also had a number of announcements on agentic workflows across the care continuum. Google's doing something very interesting, bringing together search, multimodal AI, and healthcare data infrastructure. They're all coming at it at different angles. But Kevin, the common theme across all of this is the same. Intelligence is moving into the flow of work itself. And there are a number of startups. I've been working with this startup called Theator. I think they've just recently got some innovation award. They're a great example because it shows that this is not just about chat or note writing. In the operating rooms, video is becoming structured intelligence. Another cool company that's doing really well is Open Evidence. They're a good example because it shows that the clinicians are willing to use AI, not just to document, but to think, or at least sort of to help them synthesize evidence faster at the point of care.
Oh, that's fascinating. So, what's the ultimate goal here? Are we redesigning healthcare primarily for speed and efficiency, or are we targeting human well-being? And how do we do both, actually?
Yeah, it has to be both. Efficiency matters because the system today puts a lot of burden on clinicians, a lot of burnout in the care team, whether the nursing staff or the doctors. And there's also too much friction on patients. Just imagine how difficult it is to schedule an appointment. In fact, find a specialist today. Right? The waiting list is unreal. I was trying to find a specialist for something, and my specialist sort of retired, and the next appointment is 6 months from now, and I have to do all the paperwork, the running around to get the prior auth. So there's a lot of friction on patients. But if all we do is optimize for speed, then we truly run the risk of building a more efficient version of something that people still hate. Like the question you asked me is broken, right? So to me, the real opportunity is to automate the burden around care, not the human part of care, right? That means sort of reducing the administrative burden, the amount of effort required to do all the parts of billing, for example, the number of intermediaries there are, reducing coordination, overhead, fragmentation. So clinicians can do what they truly want to do, which is take care of the patients, right? And less time using judgment, or doing manual work, and spend more time building trust and actually being present with the patients. I remember there's a very famous sort of doctor called, I think, Eric Topol, and his framing was as this. He said, I can remember, that AI can bring humanity back to medicine. And I think that's the right aspiration.
I love that. I love the notion of that. And to kind of use a personal example here, I have some asthma medicine that I take through an injection once every 2 weeks or something. And because it's a special medicine, I have to spend hours figuring out who's paying for it.
Yeah.
Because there's a manufacturer rebate, there's deductibles, there's insurance who will approve it or deny it, on and on and on. And I'm just thinking, this is for one prescription. And, I still am young enough where I could go through the hassle of doing this. But how do I do this when I'm 75 or 85 or 95?
Yeah. Kevin, interesting stat. I think 80% of your cost of healthcare as a person happens during the last few stages of your life. And so, and that's when you need the most help. And so it owe it. The technology industry owes it. AI owes it to make that easy for everyone.
So where are you seeing some small steps in the right direction?
So especially sort of when I look at AI starting with reducing administrative burden, right? We're seeing real improvement now, especially in documentation. But I'll sort of talk 2 points about this documentation. Number one is everything at the end of the day, when you look at the core actors that has a huge downstream effect that builds this whole ecosystem of industries, starts with what is referred to as an encounter or a visit or a discussion between the doctor and a patient. And that document is the source of everything that happens downstream. So for example, that, first of all, ensures that you're capturing everything appropriately and structuring it to the right way into the system of record, in this case, the system of work. So that's an agent that's doing it automatically. So that has been incredible. So there's a lot of solutions out there. They're also called ambient listening. But the point there is, instead of having a human scribe or the doctor writing it on a piece of paper or remembering it and then going home and using a pajama time to document it, that this agent is participating in that conversation, auto-generating the note. That note's called a SOAP note, not SOAP as in our integration protocol, but
subjective, objective, assessment, and plan.
You got it, buddy. You got it. Yeah. But what comes out of that is not only that note, but a bunch of other orchestrated agents. So, for example, in that conversation, typically a doctor talks about, what the plan is, right? But the plan could be, I'm going to put you on this medication and come back after 60 days to see how you're doing. Or I recommend you get your labs done, or, get some imaging done, or, let me refer you to a specialist, and so on and so forth. And so all of that is just captured right there, and the workflows are automated as a result. So, for example, let's take your use case where it's time for you to get a renewal on your medication. It would automatically understand that you're out of refills, which means you need to get an approval or prior from the payer, take care of all of that, and make that available for the care team to review, sign, and take care of it. You don't have to do any of that monkey business that you had to do recently, right?
That would be beautiful, Suhas.
Yeah. Now think about this a little bit further, right? So from that, now I'm just talking about administrative burden. I'm not even going into the clinical decisioning side. Right. We're just administrative burden. So from there, you auto-generate the codes, the medical coding required. And from there, you automatically drop a claim, and you drop a claim with ensuring that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and making sure that you can get to a denial-free claim, because the largest burden then is because payers are geared to basically deny everything, right? Yeah. And the providers know that's going to happen, so they have to they burden themselves with more documentation. So all of this can truly be reduced. But I think what's interesting about this, Kevin, is the behavioral change that comes with it as well. So I'll give you an example. So as we built out this listening, the draft, summarize, and tee things up, tee things up for the clinician, It does become very hard to go back. So I've seen situations where, this ambient documentation was temporarily down because of a cloud issue or some network issue or some device issue. And doctors have doctors have gotten so used to the change in the workflow that they're almost in panic trying to reconstruct the visit manually, right? And fortunately, sort of the way we architected it was that the information was not lost. But the reaction taught me something very important, that this is no longer a nice to have feature or productivity feature. It has already changed the way they're practicing today. So this is why I say that it's much more bigger than just burden reduction. Wow. And it truly is the beginning of a different relationship between the clinician and the system. It's no longer just asking for work. It's starting to do the work on the clinician's behalf. And the clinician's role is more of a refinement loop, approval loop, and refinement and signing off, basically.
Yes. One of the things that I've seen, Suhas, is that often the doctors are overwhelmed with responsibility to see a certain number of patients on a schedule, and they don't have a time to see a pattern in your health record. So, they might look back at the last 3 visits and then they move on. They can't see a life cycle pattern. A series of things that happened over the last couple decades that have brought you to where you are today. And so that's a pattern that means something, but the doctors aren't given the time to actually go back in there and think through all that process. Are you seeing advances somewhere along there that can help the clinician themselves?
100%. Kevin, it's not just about time. It's all about access to data. So if you think about it, right now, let's take a primary care physician. They look at you. Let's say this is the first, your first interaction is with typically a primary care physician. They then sort of refer you to a specialist, and then there's a whole bunch of things that could happen. There could be labs, there could be different tests, there could be blood draws, all these things that happen. The problem is we lack the full longitudinal record of that patient, right? You remember the first question you asked me, what's broken? That's what I said is broken. It's not just about interop. It is truly about the entire end-to-end longitudinal view of the patient, what I refer to as a timeline view of that patient, regardless of how many touch points there are with different physicians. And also, different physicians could potentially mean different EHRs and different records and so on and so forth. And so it's not necessarily just about time, right? It is about ensuring that I have the full view of the patient regardless of where I am. And also, how do I trust that data, right? So there's a lot of, I won't go into this the architecture and what happens behind the scenes, but there's a lot of sort of things like the interop, like it's called the QHIN, right? The qualified by the health information exchanges. CMS is doing something as well, which is basically tying together all these different providers in a network. So I could go and say, so for a physician, number one thing is, okay, Kevin's coming to see me today. Do I know everything about Kevin? They will make the time to prepare if they have the data, right? Now, but having said that, now you have the data. You have to think about, do I trust the data? How bad is the data? How the classic sort of data issues, and more importantly, like how much? Like again, I go back to, if you're looking at a 70-plus-year-old patient over the 70 years of their life, there's a ton of data. How do I go through figuring out? Let's say I'm just looking at diabetes. When did it manifest itself? What all happened? How many times did they go up and down? How long did the medications change? The weight change, and so on and so forth. So what is happening on the good side is, CMS is looking at, creating sort of this network, bringing in payer. The TEFCA, there's the TEFCA QHIN, which is the HIE, is provider to provider. So I can figure out, hey, what are all the systems that know about Kevin and bring that together? And in the chart, there's a bunch of things that happen where you can clean up the data, you can determine, you can define sources that are trusted and non-trusted. If they're trusted, you can combine, correlate, and pull them all together, reduce deduplication. Remember the amount of times you fill up a form that says, tell me your allergies and what medications you're taking? Yeah. You can sort of combine all of that together. So those technologies are there. And those that are untrusted, the provider can take a look at it and say, okay, I can actually trust this data and convert it, but at least they have the data. But what is most importantly that's happening now is, we can use AI to summarize it, define sort of at a glance view, define what is important, and then always drill into more details. But at least it's consumable by the physician now.
Oh, that's brilliant. So I've been writing a lot about the concept lately of polyintelligent leadership. And what I mean by that is leadership going forward is going to really be a combination of machine intelligence, human intelligence, and kind of ecological or natural intelligence braided together. And that will be the new form of leadership going forward. On that notion, I mean, how far are we seeing clinicians trust AI as, okay, you're showing me patterns here that make sense. You're giving me ideas on diagnoses here that seem to make sense or not. And let's take a look more at the data, that kind of thing. What is that? What do you think the division of labor should be today? How much is AI and how much should be a clinician making decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. So first of all, I'll start by saying that, clinicians have probably one of the highest IQs of educated people out there. And, I'll say that in my times, having spent with lots of providers, they've been actually experimenting with OpenAI and Claude and Gemini much more than we are. I mean, I'll tell you, I kid you not as much as we are, but I would say in a lot of other industries, I see clinicians do a lot more. I think clinicians actually write agents as well, right? So I would say that clinicians are viewing AI as a very capable assistant, but not as an unquestionable authority, right? So they're coexisting. But the most important aspect for any vendor that's doing anything in this space is about creating trust. And that trust comes from explainability, evidence, transparency, provenance, and repeated performance in real world workflows.
Yeah.
right? So if the AI says something that doesn't fit within your intuition, the right response is not to blindly trust it or blindly reject it, right? The right response is to pause and review. And that's why I use the word a refinement loop. And the way we were designing the systems was to provide that. For example, as part of the documentation, it generates a code, a medical code, right? Mm-hmm. And it is not exact science, to be honest, right? I mean, it's literally very, very subjective in the way, for a human to look and say, okay, I saw this patient and this is what the billing should be, right? It should be science, but actually it's quite not. And so for the AI, there is science for it to sort of say, okay, this is what the ultimate sort of, coding should be. But for that physician, the answer may be, no, well, I don't think it is severe, it's moderate, right? And so here, the physician gets into a refinement loop with the agent to sort of say, it's not about the agent just doing things blindly and saying, here, take it or leave it. It's about sort of saying, why did you actually code this as moderate?
Yeah.
And the agent would say, blah, blah, blah. And the doctor could then say, oh, no, yeah, right. Or it could say, no, actually, I don't think so. And it's sort of helping the model sort of train itself at the same time. So, okay, I get it. This is sort of how you tend to do things. But ultimately, the pair will decide whether it should be denied or accepted, right? So that is what I mean by the whole refinement loop. And to put it in a concrete example, this is one of the reasons that companies like Open Evidence, I don't know if you've heard of them, but they've gotten a lot of attention because they are grounded in evidence retrieval and synthesis, right? So the physician can see exactly where the answer is coming from. So in general, what I believe in healthcare is that trust does not come from fluency alone. It comes from source and accountability. So that's the first part. The second part is you talked about sort of the ideal division of labor between humans and AI, right? So in healthcare, so when we were trying to sort of pitch AI to providers, I always used to say that let AI do the preparatory work and humans do the accountable work, right? So, at least today, the AI is great at gathering information, summarizing, monitoring, detecting patterns, doing sort of the orchestration, routing tasks, pre-drafting and coordinating workflows, blah, 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 right? But I still feel that humans still need to firmly stay in loop wherever there's ambiguity, right? And especially in healthcare, like diagnosis or ethical trade-off, or maybe in some cases like patient communication consent. Anyway, there is high stakes judgment. So that feels to me the right balance, that you get the benefit of automation and scale, but you not lose the accountability or the human conversation.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's move on now to what are you seeing kind of at the intersection of AI, robotics, and vision, from perhaps robotic surgery to video-based assessment and automation. What are you seeing in that whole area?
Yeah, actually, I saw an article that in 2025, that robotics was being used to do sort of more remote sort of surgical kind of procedures. And this area is really, really getting interesting. I think that robotics is obviously becoming more intelligent, more connected. And in some cases, sort of, like the example I gave, I think it was Scotland, New York, where they did this, or Congo or somewhere. They operated on a patient in Congo remotely from Scotland or New York, but I can't remember exactly. So it's getting less tied to specific physical location, right? I mean, robotic surgery has been fairly mainstream, but the next chapter, I believe, is remote capability, AI-assisted perception, and maybe better interoperative intelligence. But what also matters is that the story is not about robots doing the procedure. It's also about the system understanding what is happening during the procedure. So I think I mentioned this company earlier. So the company is like Theator. It's a sort of an AI, vision-based AI company.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. They're using surgical video to create structured data and insights around documentation, quality learning, coding, billing, and all that stuff. So literally using the camera in the robotic arms to then auto-document exactly what's going on. And be more precise and getting insights around documentation and quality. But one of the interesting things, if you look at sort of the progression of multimodal as well, Kevin, right? So we went from text to speech, right? So a lot of things now I just love talking to OpenAI and Gemini with speech.
Yeah. Me too. I had a long conversation yesterday.
Yeah, I went in the car. I just bring up some topics, something I just remember, and like, okay, let's talk about that, right? I'm seeing some interesting startups, but vision is going to be one of the most important frontiers in healthcare that's going to benefit us all, right? So healthcare is not just about language, it's also about movement, posture, gesture, right? Like in physical rehabilitation, there's a physical reality to to our body, right? And that is, so I've been working with this friend of mine who has a company that's doing gait analysis, GAIT analysis, using video neurological assessments through simple cameras. I mean, one of the big cost factors is it's really expensive. Like if you go to a gait lab, right? Like if you had a stroke or something and you go to rehabilitation, you want to go and you want to see how you're walking, you go to a gait lab, you put all these sensors, and it's a pretty expensive setup.
Yeah.
You could do this with a simple camera on your phone or your tablet, right? And so I think video intelligence and remote physical monitoring are going to matter a lot. That's sort of what I feel is going to happen.
Wow. To me, that's super exciting.
Yeah.
One, because I mean, you don't even have to have the AI in the room. You can just be feeding the video back to a data center that has AI.
Correct. Yeah.
And then it comes back with the answers. Wow.
But also, Kevin, you know, it's interesting that, I mean, you look at sort of the iPhone and also sort of all the things that Google are doing. I think that the Moore's law on the capacity of the chips, right? You see sort of AI at the edge, right? Mm-hmm. And so while, totally, you can do a lot of the streaming and all that, but like take cars, for instance, right? The real-time collision detection and all that stuff. Those kind of technologies with, I think, Super Micro, I forget the name of the company, but they're doing some very interesting things on the chip side to make it at the edge. Yeah. And so as you start looking into vision side of things, because your latency has to be like little to nothing.
Yes.
In an operating room. So I think there's going to be huge opportunity there.
Oh, yeah. And then on the high end, you can say, look, humans, we have one way of using vision, but you add to human vision, X-ray and infrared and hyperspectral cameras. So you can have this array of different kinds of lenses and cameras that can tell you information completely different than a human can see. Absolutely. As well. So you could see how they could push the limits there too.
Yeah, imagine, Kevin, like the future of a hospital, right? I mean, today, you have those Wi-Fi stuck on the ceiling and all that stuff, right? Imagine that. I mean, okay, you're going to think about privacy and all that. But imagine those were both video as well as audio.
Yeah.
You don't have to roam around with mobile devices either. I mean, right now people are moving around in the hospital with this big laptop stuck to a
wheel cart.
Wheel cart, right? Imagine that. Okay, we at least started we were trying to move them away from that to mobile phones, but imagine you don't even have that. You could actually be taking care of your patients instead of figuring out what do I need to document or hand off.
Wow, I love it. Last question for you, Suhas, before I let you go. How do you think healthcare will look fundamentally different 10 years from now? What do you think it'll be? How will it be different and what will it look like?
Ask me 10 years from now and I'll tell you. I think this is a hope, and I hope my hope becomes reality.
Yeah.
That healthcare will feel a lot less disconnected, and it feels more of a collection of disconnected encounters and a lot more like coordinated, continuously learning system about myself.
Wow.
Right. I feel that I'm for sure a lot of the administrative work will be automated. I think patient engagement will be much more personalized and ongoing. So we won't have to do the clipboard every time we go. I think, and I mean, CMS is actually already working on Kill the Clipboard initiative.
Yeah.
I think some expertise will travel digitally through robotics and telepresence. I think, and as I said earlier, I think more insight will come from multimodal signals, not just text or voice, but movement, sensor, and context. But others sort of end by saying that, if I had to boil it down one sentence, healthcare IT is becoming more a system of work, not just a system of record.
Wow. I've always thought to myself that the more mature, you can tell the maturity of a technology by how little you see of it.
Yes.
It disappears into the background. And when it disappears into the background where it's all happening and you don't have to be holding it and plugging it and punching it, and that will be a beautiful day. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today in your busy schedule and being able to just give us some of your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me. Enjoy the talk.